3 rings for the elven kings under the sky. 7 for the dwarf lords in their halls of stone. 9 for mortal men doomed to die. 1 for the Dark Lord. Throne in the land of Mordor, where the shadows lie. 1 ring to rule them all, 1 ring to find them, 1 ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them in the land of Mordor, where the shadows lie. Okay. Let's. And we are live, I believe. Can anyone hear me?
I can hear you, good sir. I don't think we can see anything at the moment. I think it's it is a dark screen.
That's odd. We've been having some technical issues for a bit. Let me try. Something. I'll try.
So be it.
This, and we'll see if it'll improve a bit of the ambiance. Okay.
There's the PowerPoint.
Yeah, we have that. I'm just trying to add us back onto the screen. I have no idea what I'm doing here. Let's see. Maximize.
Okay. Yeah. There we go. There we
go. Finally.
Very nice.
I just need to click off the maximize bit. All right. Now, due to technical problems on my end, my camera's flicked off. Let me
You'll just have to, enjoy my ugly mug for the day.
Well, it's probably better looking than mine. Considering I'm the unmarried one, so
whatever.
Now, okay, there. All right, I think the slide should be working. If not, I'll just scroll through.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, I can't actually do the slideshow thing because Microsoft PowerPoint is starting to crash.
Yeah, I don't. Okay, gotcha. If the slides don't work, so be it. If you want to manually do it, so be it. But okay, gotcha. No worries. We'll go old school on this.
I've got it.
But now I should say, I should say Happy Easter to everybody.
Yep.
So
welcome.
And it's quite fitting actually to be having this chat today. I mean, back just a couple of weeks ago, March 25th, you guys, Brothers Arda and Dork Lords, participated in the Tolkien Reading Day celebration. This year's theme was Unlikely Heroes. I made a video about the little-known woodsman who saved Turin's life, Hunthor. But one of the commenters on that video asked why Tolkien chose March 25th as the date that the ring was destroyed. Well, as it happens, medieval Christians viewed March 25th as the date of the crucifixion. And so it seems somewhat fitting there. Here we are on Easter talking about the Fellowship of the Ring. But yeah, so there you go. There's your why is March 25th selected as the date of the ring. You know, the Fellowship sets out on Christmas Day, and the ring is destroyed on what essentially is Good Friday, essentially.
And I believe there's another little fun fact. Oh, right. And March 25th is just 6 days after one important saint's festival day, and that's Saint Joseph, who was stepfather to Jesus. So,
very nice.
It's said that he died, I think, on the 19th. So, it's interesting that within the same week,
many years later, Christ himself would pass away. So there's that. It's a very well. That's what the medievals believed. But so it's a very like from March 19th through to Easter. It's a very interesting set of days historically.
Understood.
Yeah, like I just think this stuff is pretty interesting. And
yeah,
Tolkien,
and obviously Tolkien was very, he wanted to ground that in these special dates of religious significance.
yeah. Oh, I should also look up. Let me see something. On what date? I'm looking some little fun fact up.
Well noted by Joe Quake here. He mentioned Sam and Frodo wake up
Okay.
in Cormallen on a Saturday with a full moon that evening. Being early spring, that makes the next day Easter Sunday. Very well
An
done.
interesting fun fact. It'd be around the same time in Hour of the Dragon that Conan finally defeats the Dark Lord, Zaltotun.
It's all connected.
Yes, it's all in the same universe.
Yep. If you click on that that second slide, there's slide number 2.
Oh, yes.
This before we jump into the chapter we're going to talk about today, just a quick note. So I recently went to see the Fellowship of the Ring in a theater with a live orchestra. Not only that, it had a giant choir, like 100-person choir, and then some awesome solo vocalists. They performed the entire soundtrack live, I think with one exception that I could tell. The dancing music at the party tree in the beginning. So it's like the jig. They didn't play that. I'm like, oh, that's okay. But everything else, even if it was just incidental music, they covered it. And it was glorious. It was awesome. It was awesome to behold. I would say the only downside was that I wanted to watch the musicians and the film at the same time. Couldn't do both. Because they were a bit louder than the dialogue. You could hear the dialogue, but it was a little fainter. They played it with subtitles. Not that I needed them, but they had them. I would say my 2 goosebump moments where you're like, was Frodo getting stabbed on Weathertop. And then in Moria, when Gandalf says, behold the great realm, dwarf city of Dweridof. The music swells there are just fantastic. They're just like instantly moving. And then the child solo for the end of the film, the Breaking of the Fellowship song. I mean, come on, you tip your cap. That was, it holds that sense of pathos about the whole thing. It just really, really, really solid. So if it happens to come to your town, the showing of the Fellowship of the Ring with a live orchestral accompaniment has my enthusiastic recommendation. There you go.
Okay.
But today we're going to be talking about the 8th chapter of Book 2 of the Fellowship of the Ring, entitled Farewell to Lorien, which also had some awesome musical accompaniment in that showing. We get how about a quick summary? We open with the Fellowship spending their last night in Lothlorien, unsure of whether to head straight for Mount Doom or take a detour to Minas Tirith. The party is spared making a decision for now because the elves give them boats to head down the Anduin River, which, as it happens, is the best route to get to both locations for a while. As they prepare to set out, Galadriel becomes her own giver of gifts and heaps a bunch of top quality items and gear on our crew. And as they sail away, she sings a song of farewell, Namarie. With that short summary out of the way, Joe, feel free to take us through in more detail.
Okay, so thank you for that. Now, the company are summoned before Celeborn, and he and his lady greet them with fair words, as Tolkien comments. And of course, Celeborn, never one able to resist chattering them to death. proceeds to start doing so. I'm just saying the guy likes to talk, and Galadriel has to draw the conversation forward, and Boromir makes it clear that he's intent on getting back home. And there's something in the way, like about this sentence. As for me, my way home lies onward and not back. Reminds me very strongly of the Odyssey, with Odysseus always pushing to go forward, because his way lies forward to his family, not backwards.
We also have obviously the song, "The Road Goes Ever On and On," right? I mean, it does have that sense of forward looking.
Yeah, and if Boromir is very obviously resolved to go forward, Aragorn is still undecided.
He sure is.
Because he says, beyond Lorien, I do not know what Gandalf intended to do. Indeed, I do not think that even he had any clear purpose. Now, before that, he said, we have not decided our course. But the very fact that he admits, we're not sure. And I don't even know if Gandalf really had any, had an exact plan in mind.
And he even admits in there, I'm losing the passage, but he admits that in his mind, he was going to advocate for himself going to Minas Tirith. Like he assumed he would be going to Minas Tirith, and that's where, that would be his decision in the moment. But now that Gandalf is gone, he feels maybe he can't leave Frodo on it, to his own devices, and so he's changing his mind on that. But interesting that was in his mind at the time, because he had these dreams, and he's like, they felt like that was somehow a summons for him to go to Minas Tirith.
Yeah, and what makes it worse is that, he obviously has a strong protective instinct towards his companions, which is modeled after, I think, the idea of, a paternal instinct most fathers have, and it was believed that kings should have for their subjects. Many of them didn't have that instinct, many of them did. But Tolkien's clearly modeling the idea. Well, Aragorn's modeled after King Arthur, so he's supposed to have that paternal drive for his subjects and his friends.
The hands of a healer.
Yeah, precisely. And what I find interesting is that, now I'm going to bash Jackson a little, is that Jackson decides that the indecision should be the core of Aragorn's character, and that the indecision is regarding whether or not he wants to actually be king and whatnot, because Hollywood doesn't understand the man, like the idea of a man who's confident in his own destiny. But the thing is, on the other hand, Tolkien presents a character who's, he is kind of consumed by indecision, but it's not about his own destiny, but so much as it is like, which path does he, like you said, leave Frodo on his own, or does he take up Gandalf's role and stay close to Frodo? Which one does he do? And so I think that Tolkien's way of presenting this indecision and his stance and perspective here is much more interesting. It's a much more nuanced.
Agree. I mean, we're obviously I'm going to mention something that's happening at the end of the book as opposed to this chapter, but in the book version of Frodo, kind of using, as it turns out, the confusion of the battle and Boromir's sad death, he decides, I'm just going to take off on my own and not tell anyone. And that choice, I agree, is more powerful than the choice what we see in the movies, which is Aragorn and Legolas and Gimli making their conscious choice not to go with them. And it's like, I kind of feel like they wouldn't make that choice in that moment, frankly. But anyway, just to say, I like that. I like the notion of Frodo making that choice himself, as opposed to that choice being made by others.
Yeah, and Frodo in the novel has a lot more agency, I guess would be the right term for it.
You mentioned real fast Celeborn, over talking a little bit, and I'll mention one thing that I thought it's kind of an interesting. It's an interesting little Easter egg of sorts, although it doesn't actually get resolved.
Easter egg.
It's the quote is after they had eaten and drunk, sitting upon the grass, Celeborn spoke to them again of their journey, and lifting his hand, he pointed south to the woods beyond the tongue. You can see the tongue there in that map. As you go down the water, he said, you will find that the trees will fail and you will come to a barren country. Now, what he's talking about there is the Brownlands. And we don't know a lot about the Brownlands from Lord of the Rings, but there's a really interesting, in one of Tolkien's letters, he describes kind of the background of the Brownlands and what it might have meant for the Ents and the Entwives. And so I'm going to read this passage from Tolkien's letters in response to a writer. I think that in fact, the Entwives had disappeared for good, being destroyed with their gardens in the War of the Last Alliance, when Sauron pursued a scorched earth policy and burned their land against the advance of the allies down the Anduin. They survived only in the agriculture transmitted to men and hobbits. Some, of course, may have fled east or even have become enslaved. Tyrants, even in such tales, must have an economic and agricultural background to their soldiers and metalworkers. If any survived so, they would indeed be far estranged from the Ents, and any rapprochement would be difficult, unless experience of industrialized and militarized agriculture had made them a little more anarchic. I hope so. I don't know. Which is very on brand for Tolkien. He often treats himself as a Middle-earth historian, chronicling actual events instead of an author having the power to simply make them up himself. So he's talking about what perhaps led to the disappearance of the Entwives. And it was this scorched earth policy of Sauron in the War of the Last Alliance. And so you've got this thing on the Third Age maps, which is the Brownlands. And I think it's interesting. I mean, Sauron certainly used the power of the ring to magnify the effect of that burning. And since that was over 3,000 years ago, but the vegetation has still never grown back. And so if any of the Fellowship had known that fact, I think it would be a reminder to them of the power of this item they've been asked to destroy, that it took out this entire section of forest, including, as it turns, the Entwives, and never grew back for thousands of years. It's a big testament to the power of the ring, I think. Anyway, just throwing that out there.
Yeah, and the Entwives are, well, I think they were obviously destroyed, but it's just.
But could you fanfic your way into like a couple of them survived? He mentions, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe a couple of them survived. It's kind of his like throwing his hands up moment. But
I'm of the opinion, no, none of them survived. It's impossible. But I have a very cynical outlook.
You cynical? No. Come on now, Joe.
But on the other hand, I like that Boromir is giving advice and counsel, but he comments here, but I am not the leader of the company.
Good point. Good point. He doesn't just commandeer leadership.
Yeah, he's respectful, which is very interesting, which is a very subtle touch, and Tolkien adding a very positive moment for Boromir. At least I took it as very positive. Clearly, he's hungry to go back home, but he's not so hungry that he'll squabble and fight with the others.
Yep.
And Celeborn basically says, I'm not going to choose for you. I'm condensing what he's saying. And I like that Mary points out that he's used to the sea due to having grown up by the banks of the Brandywine, which I like that touch because, you know, not all hobbits like water.
Most of them don't, right? There's kind of the brandy bucks are kind of an exception in that way.
Yeah, and of course, the company then leave to go to their pavilions. Um, and of course, um, uh, let me see. I believe it was. This is where it gets a little interesting. Um, this is where Aragorn pretty much admits to himself, at least, that his plan was, as you said, to, um, while Gandalf remained with him, go with Boromir and to wield Anduril to help save Gondor, because he had been, he thinks of the message in his dreams as a summons, and that as the heir of Elendil and Isildur, um, he has to take back Gondor. I would argue this would put him in direct conflict with Denethor.
Of course, yes.
And I would even go so far as to say that this would put him in even Boromir, in direct conflict with Denethor, because Boromir, in my view, would probably support Aragorn. So, and Denethor, I have a poor opinion of him, as you know. I consider it he loves power and his position more than he loves his sons, so that he would ultimately strive against his sons, even if they both.
I think you're right. Joe Quake mentions there are some strong indicators of Boromir's downward slide in the chapter. Yeah, I was about to say this. So let's read that little passage. It's in the similar passage when you were talking about where he's like, "Hey, but it's the will of the Fellowship." But so Boromir says, "I shall go to Minas Tirith alone if need be, for it is my duty," said Boromir. And after that, he was silent for a while, sitting with his eyes fixed on Frodo, as if he was trying to read the halfling's thoughts. At length he spoke again, softly, as if he was debating with himself. "If you wish only to destroy the ring," he said, "then there is little use in war and weapons, and the men of Minas Tirith cannot help. But if you wish to destroy the armed might of the Dark Lord, then it is folly to go without force into his domain, and folly to throw away." He paused suddenly, as if he'd become aware that he was speaking his thoughts aloud. "It would be folly to throw lives away, I mean," he ended. That's your Freudian slip moment there, Joe.
Yeah.
He paused suddenly, as if he had become aware that he was speaking. Okay. "It is a choice between defending a strong place and walking openly into the arms of death. At least that's how I see it." Frodo caught something new and strange in Boromir's glance, and he looked hard at him. Plainly, Boromir's thought was different from his final words. It would be folly to throw away what? The Ring of Power? He had said something like this at the council, but then he had accepted the correction of Elrond. So yeah, we're a huge red flag that Boromir's going to succumb to the power of the ring. The fact that he's having this talk with himself, it feels very much, Gollum Sméagol's, right? He's got a side of him that says, "Oh, we should use the ring," and the other side saying, "Well, we should, walk to destroy it." So yeah. It's a big tell there.
It is a big tell, and I think it an interesting one, because while I pointed out that we do see a positive side of Boromir, here we see the negative, and that the ring is working and weaving its spell over him. Now,
interesting, real fast too. There's another sentence shortly after that where Frodo is obviously gone like, "Oh wow, Boromir is giving off some really
creepy vibes,
warning signs here." And so it says, "Frodo looked at Aragorn, but he seemed deep in his own thought and made no sign that he had heeded Boromir's words." I don't know, maybe he did and he's not showing it, but it's interesting if you take it at face value that Aragorn is still caught up in the idea of like, should I go? Should I not? Blah, blah, blah. He's not even really paying attention as Boromir, talks. But interesting that Frodo is picking it up and like, did you pick that up? Did anyone else see that? And
Nope.
no one else is like jumping in to be like, you're right. We should really watch that guy.
It is funny because it's a very odd moment because you'd think everyone would notice Boromir acting up, but
I guess it's just Frodo's perceptive. But yeah. Oh yeah, exactly. Joe Quake mentions also an indication of Frodo's strong insight. Yeah.
Yeah, it is, and I think. Well, I have I guess, optimistic stance on Boromir to an extent, but I think that so long as he's near the ring, he was bound to go a little bonkers.
Yep.
It was bound to destroy him. But once separated, that's where I think he'd support Aragorn and prove himself a better companion. It's just a matter of separating him from temptation. And this is in line with some of Tolkien's ideas about temptation as a concept, because at one point he wrote a letter to his son Michael regarding sexuality and love. And in it, he wrote that he doesn't think that, men should have, like once you're married, you should have any female friends because you're putting yourself in temptation's path. And the more you tempt yourself, the more you're likely to give in. And I think there's a larger philosophical idea here that we can take from this. And I think that this idea plays out in Lord of the Rings in that the more characters are exposed to the One Ring, the more they start to give in to the temptation. But once separated from the temptation, they seem to revert typically to themselves.
There is that, it's in the Disaster of Gladden Fields when Isildur is killed. There's a quote in there when the ring slips off his finger in the river, and in the moment that it slips off, he's distraught. I must find it. But then Tolkien writes that when he realizes he can't find it, there's this sense of relief about like, oh, this weight is gone from me. Like it wasn't his choice to have it leave, but now that it's gone, he recognizes that it was this terrible burden, and he's appreciative of it. Guten Tag, Mark. Good to see you. In internet terms.
Hello, Mark.
Yeah, and I think it's also interesting that, nobody really is paying attention to Boromir. I think it showcases also how grave the situation is, that they're not paying attention to one of their companions getting a little weird on them. While, on the other hand, this is such an understated moment which has just slipped in, like almost into the background of the larger drama, so that the smaller B plot, so to speak, interweaves itself with the larger A plot, if that makes any sense.
I got you. It's almost like we, the audience, don't pick it up. Maybe you're like, "Whoa, that guy's a danger."
Well, we pick it up if we pay attention, but if we don't, we don't.
But if we're like Aragorn in that moment, then
yeah. And what I like is that this is a case where Tolkien is doing something that not many authors do today, which is treat their audience as though they're intelligent. And this is something that, anyone who follows me on Substack knows I've beaten into the pavement as a core reason for why writers like Tolkien and Howard and Mark Twain and others stand out, because they were treating their readers as though they were intelligent and could put two and two together. And in a lot of ways, you almost have to read the text, like the ideas behind the words, rather than just the words, if that makes any sense. And yes, Fatty would have noticed, of course. Yes.
Of course, he would have noticed. Probably, in fact, he did. he wrote Frodo this really detailed letter, and then Frodo promptly lost it. I was like, oh, listen to Freddie. We do get then this appearance by Galadriel on a swan boat. The line is, they turned a sharp bend in the river, and there, sailing proudly down the stream towards them, they saw a swan of great size. The water rippled on either side of the white breast beneath its curving neck. Its beak shone like burnished gold, and its eyes glinted like jet set in yellow stones. Its huge white wings were half lifted. A music came down the river as it drew nearer, and suddenly they perceived it was a ship, wrought and carved with elven skill in the likeness of a bird. And this is another one of those things that I don't think it's like an Easter egg that is not apparent in the Fellowship of the Ring, but the swan boat almost certainly is an homage to the swan ships of the Teleri elves. Galadriel's mother, Yarwyn, is a Teleri elf back in Aman. And it was for the use of those swan ships that Feanor committed the first kinslaying against the Teleri. And since, I don't know, I feel like since Galadriel actually has this, she has a familial tie to the Noldor, but a familial tie to the Teleri, I think Galadriel's use of such a boat shows that she respects and honors that side of her heritage. Anyway, it's a thing that you wouldn't pick up if you just read the Fellowship of the Ring.
No. And it's honestly one of the sleeker nods Tolkien slips in as well. I think it's like the first time I read the Silmarillion after and then reread the Lord of the Rings right afterwards, I thought it was just one of the most interesting nods he slipped in, because you don't really see it coming to an extent, even as you kind of realize, oh yeah, this is a nice little nod to the Teleri, and I guess also to Swan Lake or something, which the only reason I'll mention is just in hindsight, Lord of the Rings and even the Silmarillion is loaded down with a lot of literary references and cultural references of all sorts. And I like how you have Gimli who says when he eats one of the cakes, it's called cram. And, the elves tease him about it, and he says, I thought it was only a kind of cram, such as the Dale men make for journeys in the wild. So it is, they answered, but we call it lambas or whey bread, and it is more strengthening than any food made by men. It is more pleasant than cram by all accounts. And the lambas, as all know, is supposed to be pretty much taken from the idea of the Eucharist. Whatnot, because, and this is one of the few, I would argue, somewhat blatant nods Tolkien makes to Catholicism, which usually he wove into the background rather than into the foreground. Which is as it should be. Your own kind of philosophical or religious views should be in the background, not the foreground. Otherwise, it feels like bludgeoning the point over people's heads.
Another interesting point about Lembas is that, again, it's not something that you find out in the Fellowship of the Ring, but that particular recipe for lembas was given to Galadriel by Melian, the Maya Melian, Thingol's wife, in the First Age, and so she then passed it along to her followers in the Third Age. But there's a lot of tie-ins. I do feel like Galadriel being the Third Age version of Melian is kind of a there's a lot of correlations there between Lothlorien and the protection of Lothlorien versus the girdle of Melian. The fact that Melian just was her mentor, was her tutor for all that time, with the knowledge that she then passed along to her people in the Third Age. Anyway, interesting stuff.
There's only one difference, I think, between the two. I think Thingol's way cooler than Celeborn.
Well, also, it's a Maya versus an elf, but yes.
Yeah. And there's also Luthian, who's obviously far more
Yeah.
important than Celebrian. Not that Celebrian's not important, it's just Luthian is basically the main character in some ways. At least it seems like that to me. Like
So
Tolkien
Mark
made her.
Mark asked the question: if Galadriel had given Frediger a gift, what would Freddie have gotten as a gift from Galadriel? Maybe it's Galadriel's mirror, so he can look upon himself and see like the best creature in all of Middle Earth.
Or a fat-free lambas.
Okay, there you go. Eat just a little at a time, as they're saying. They say that eat a little at a time, only at need. But yeah, anyway, funny.
The relative
Oh, I see. Your Joe Quake says the relative stature. Galadriel versus Celeborn seems a bit strange in the chapter to me. Galadriel stands behind, seated, Celeborn in the swan ship. I have a drawing of the swan ship, by the way. I think that's slide 4 or something like that. Celeborn seems superior during all the meetings. Yeah, there is a situational thing. It seems like Galadriel gives him at least like a public deference, like in the previous chapter, which he says, "Oh, he's the wisest in all the land," even though that's almost provably not true. That she's actually wiser than he is, but she gives this deference to him, even though it's kind of one of those things where it feels like everyone knows the truth, but she's not going to upstage her husband. It's kind of what it feels like.
Well, she's also showing respect for him that way, because when you're in a marriage, you're supposed to respect your partner and try to present them in the best light.
Yep.
So it's kind of her job as his queen and his job as her king and husband to present her very well. So I guess I just look at it as
there's kind of a courtly politeness about all that. Yeah,
and I do think that even today we should. That's how a proper married couple should probably behave. Just respectful of each other and try to talk each other up in public. You know what I mean? Like compliment them and present them very well. Otherwise, well, it's humiliating. But yeah, the swan ships and just the amount of food they pour on the company is pretty funny, and it shows that Galadriel knows and Celeborn know their job. They're there to help the Fellowship.
And we get a bit of this sense of, Galadriel, as we just mentioned, she is at heart in some ways, a Noldor elf. So like Feanor, like Celebrimbor, here it feels like she's showing off her talent for making elven tech. The gifts they're giving them are things they made. In fact, there's the one line. I'm gonna lose the line. It's something. It literally says she made it herself. I'll see if I can find that.
Let me show you the different lengths of wire I used.
Yeah. Anyway, but there's a series of items. Obviously, if you go back to the previous chapter too, the Mirror of Galadriel, it's a bit of Noldor tech essentially. What is it that she made? Anyway, I'll find it in a second. But she gives then to Aragorn a very powerful item. I mean, she gives obviously the elf stone is more symbolic, but then she gives him this scabbard. Here is the gift of Celeborn and Galadriel to the leader of your company, she said to Aragorn, and she gave him a sheath that had been made to fit his sword. It was overlaid with a tracery of flowers and leaves wrought of silver and gold, and on it were set in elven runes, formed of many gems, the name Anduril and the lineage of the sword. The blade that is drawn from this sheath shall not be stained or broken, even in defeat, she said. So that kind of harkens back to me. You mentioned earlier the Arthurian thing. There's a version of the Excalibur legend in which the real power comes in the scabbard. That it's the scabbard of Excalibur that holds this really intense power.
Yeah, they both have their own powers.
Yeah,
Is how
right.
they-
But right,
they-
just to
they-
say, it's not just like, oh, that's the casing it comes in. Oh, it's actually got some actual
Yeah.
use to it. So anyway,
Yeah.
interesting stuff. Right,
That's,
we've
that's
got
exactly the key.
the file of Galadriel is another, which I always do appreciate the fact that the file of Galadriel is a reflection of the water in Galadriel's mirror, which is a reflection of the light of the Silmaril in the sky, which is a reflection of the light of the two trees. And so it's like the light of those trees has been passed down in this, continual way all through thousands of years until it ends up in this glass enclosure that ultimately helps defeat one of the spawn of Ungoliant. Ungoliant destroyed the two trees, the file of Galadriel. After all that light's passed down, and it helps defeat Shelob. So it's really an interesting, the
Revenge.
poetry they rhyme kind of moment. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just like that how we have Ungoliant who spreads darkness, but ultimately Shelob's darkness is defeated by the very light that Ungoliant sought to destroy, to spread that darkness. So I just think it's very poetic. Also, in that regard, from a thematic point of view.
The gift that she gives to Sam, I've always appreciated as well. So she gives him a Malorn seed, which replaces the party tree eventually. And then she gives him earth from Lorien, which is going to be amazing to grow things. And so that gift is not intended to help on the quest. It will have no bearing on whether they complete the quest or not. She's assuming they're going to be successful, and then that will be this remedy for the troubles that Sam saw in the mirror with the Shire. And so she's fixing the issue that Sam sees, which maybe makes him more confident to go on the quest itself. But it's interesting because it's a gift. The other gifts pretty much seem, at least in some way, targeted at helping them on their quest. But that's the one that maybe it's just, as I say, it gives Sam this confidence to put Shire in the rearview mirror for a bit while he completes the quest, and then he knows he can help repair the damage to the Shire with this particular really amazing gift.
I also think that with the Noldor pride, there's a bit of the, like, there's something a little odd in that she's, how do I put it? The pride also shows itself in, like I do not know what you mean by that. When Pippin asks, are these magic cloaks? They are fair garments, and the web is good, for it was made in this land. They are elvish robes, certainly, if that is what you mean. Basically, like with the whole magic thing, she's basically playing dumb. It's, well, no, it's just really advanced science you don't yet understand, basically, is what she's saying. But for all intents and purposes, it's magic. It's just
right.
She's
yeah,
just
like
gonna,
you perceive it as magic. Yeah.
But she's basically going to lawyer her way around saying the blunt truth. And this is where I will actually say she shows something of I would argue in that moment, a hubris that you don't see in Elrond. Elrond, when asked pointedly, is this, or is that such and such, will just say yes or no. You know what I mean? Like, we've gotten used to Elrond, who says things point blank. But Galadriel will never talk like that. She's not Elrond. And I may like her, but I think that Elrond is the wiser one of the two.
Well, you do get that way, back when Frodo is talking with Gildor and Glorian, and I forget the exact quote, but it's like, if he gets an answer he doesn't really like from Gildor, it's like wishy-washy. And he's like, if you ask enough a question, they'll tell you both yes and no in the same answer. And so there's a little bit of hedging his bets.
And oddly, I do know, like, I recognize that the elves are wise, but I think this is one of their flaws, is their indecisiveness on giving a straight answer. But I think that
like I said, this is why I think so highly of Elrond, is that he's able to give straight answers and just say it as it is and not.
Good call from Mark here. He says the first time Aragorn came to Lorien, he should have had the Ring of Barahir. I agree. Seeing it must have been a moment for Galadriel. Yeah, great point. Great point. The ring she would be very familiar with, which she probably, well, she might have. I mean, it was obviously a part of the leaders of Gondor, or I should say, Arnor, for a time. So maybe she might have seen it in her mind fairly recent past. But you're right. A few thousand years probably went by before this came back around. Maybe 1,500 years, something like that. So yeah, but you're right. It was lost. It was lost up in the north, and then I think it was Elrond ended up acquiring it and then giving it to Aragorn eventually when Aragorn was old enough. So it would be interesting. I don't. Yeah, did Elrond mention to Galadriel that he had that ring, or did he kind of keep it more of a secret until this moment when suddenly Aragorn shows up with her? Whoa! Yeah, yes, it's Finrod's ring. So yeah, good call. I guess on that point we should mention this the Elf Stone. So Galadriel gives let's see if I can get the quote here.
An Elf Stone to Aragorn.
Yet maybe this will lighten your heart, said Galadriel, for it was left in my care to be given to you, should you pass through this land. Then she lifted from her lap a great stone of a clear green, set in a silver brooch that was wrought in the likeness of an eagle with outspread wings. And as she held it up, the gem flashed like the sun shining through the leaves of spring. This stone I gave to Celebrian, my daughter, and she to hers. And now it comes to you as a token of hope. In this hour, take the name that was foretold for you, Elisar, the Elf Stone of the House of Elendil. Then Aragorn took the stone, pinned the brooch upon his breast, and those who saw him wondered, for they had not marked before how tall and kingly he stood, and it seemed to them that many years of toil had fallen from his shoulders. For the gifts that you have given me, I thank you, he said, O Lady of Lorien, of whom were sprung Celebrian and Arwen Evenstar. What praise could I say more? And so the background to the Elf Stone is that there's a few different versions of it, depending on, canonically speaking. But I think the most accurate canonical version is that this is a copy of the original Elf Stone, which was made back in the First Age. Celebrimbor forged a different version of it. I think it's an Unfinished Tales. There's a thought that Celebrimbor basically had feelings for Galadriel, and so he gave it to her as like a sign of his affection, and was rather put off by the fact that Celeborn was in the picture. But it still does have some of the magical powers that the original Elfstone did. I think aiding and healing. In this case, we see that it seems to have an effect on Aragorn and the way he's perceived. So yeah. Anyway, it's a version of the stone made by Celebrimbor, and I believe the first version of that stone has been lost to time, probably in the fall of Gondolin, if I had to guess.
Okay. Well, that also takes us up to the song, which
one more gift. Actually, we got to cover. We got to cover the really interesting gift. Another. It's interesting. The more I talk here about this chapter, the more I'm mentioning things that don't get a payoff in the Lord of the Rings. But the fact that it's Gimli, she kind of pushes on him like, "What do you want?" And Gimli's like, "Nothing. I don't need anything." She's like, "No, ask me for something." And so he finally agrees. Okay, this might sound weird. I want a single strand of your hair. And so, so there's nothing Lady Galadriel, said Gimli, bowing low and stammering. Nothing unless it is permitted to ask, nay, to name a single strand of your hair, which surpasses the gold of the earth as the stars surpass the gems of the mine. I do not ask for such a gift, but you commanded me to name my desire. And so she then gives him 3 hairs. And she also, though, first she asks him why he wants it. And he says, well, but tell me, what would you do with such a gift? And he says, treasure it, lady, in memory of your words to me at our first meeting. And if ever I return to the smithies of my home, it shall be set in imperishable crystal to be an heirloom of my house and a pledge of goodwill between the mountain and the wood until the end of days. And then says she unbraided one of her tresses, cut off 3 hairs, laid them in Gimli's hand. So it's that answer is what ends up making her choose to do it. Right, exactly, Mark. In your face, Feanor. Because Feanor, as we learn in the Silmarillion, asked her 3 different times for a strand of her hair, and she correctly devised from him a creepy vibe and said, go away. And it says like they were unfriends for their ever after or something like that. And so the 3 hairs that
friended him on Facebook?
She did, exactly. I mean, it does say unfriend, which I always, obviously it was an age before Facebook, but it works in both contexts. And so here it's almost as if she's, it is an in-your-face Feanor moment. She's like, this dwarf I view as having a higher morality than the king of the Noldor back in the day.
He does.
So it's because he does, rightfully so, he does. But so it's just really interesting. It's a really strong rebuke. I don't know that anyone would catch it other than her, but just the idea that somehow that would get back to Feanor one day. I don't know. Just it really is a huge dunk on Feanor and his his ethics. I wouldn't give this to you. I will give this to a worthy recipient, a dwarf. Nice. I like it. But again, none of that's in the book. You wouldn't get, again, if you just read Lord of the Rings, you don't get any of that context. It's really interesting. It's great in a lot of ways. It's fun. Yes, Gimli is worthy as he is later entering Valinor. Yep. Yes, Joe, I made a joke. You said, is there any comparison to Galadriel and Annatar? Both are givers of gifts. I just mentioned that she was the giver of gifts in this chapter. And yes, I mean, she gives a lot of gifts. Now, in Annatar's case, he's giving them in a way, in an attempt to manipulate and corrupt the receivers. Here, she's giving them as a way, in fact, to defeat Sauron. But I don't feel that it's the intent of the givers. Are they both master gift makers? Yes. Yes, they are. Just, I suppose, the purpose of said gifts.
I'd say Galadriel's gifts are far better.
Well, sure. I mean, to the user. I mean, ultimately, Sauron came to Celebrimbor with promises and ended up destroying his realm and himself and putting him up on a spike. So that didn't work out well. So in your face, Sauron, exactly. Exactly. And of course,
it
goes without saying, she would have given like a whole head of hair to Frediger. We can acknowledge that.
She'd be bald after.
Yeah, exactly. She's like, I have to wear a
wig. Oh my gosh, a hobbit with a golden wig. Poor Galadriel in that scenario.
All right, so now we come to our two songs.
Lambas, and now, I'm just gonna make sure
it's the second song that I have a lot more to say about, actually, but we can talk about the first song as well.
All right. First song. Let me just scroll back. All right. I sang of leaves of gold and leaves of gold. Their group. Yeah. This one is interesting in that it harkens back to Eldamar and the walls of Elven Tyrion. And and how um, it's a sea song, really, a song of the sea, but also of the elder days.
And it's a bit of regret, right? She's missing the
Yeah,
West.
it's full of regret, wistfulness, longing, and sorrow for what's been lost. Um, it's really, in hindsight, hard not to feel for her and her people because they've basically lost everything at this point, and they have only to bow to destiny and go west and fade away, in a way, from this world.
And
It's
she's not sure if she can go west. I mean,
yeah,
she is now when in the previous chapter when she says like I shall just become Galadriel and diminish into the west, she's at least contemplating the idea that maybe by rejecting the ring she might be worthy of going, but she's not sure. She's not sure at all that she's still able to head. She the ban might still be on her.
exactly. So she's very likely nervous and apprehensive of what she's going to find in the West. Which who could blame her?
Yep.
Well, I suppose we could blame her for her past actions, and there are consequences to your actions, but we can't blame her for dreading what's to come and hoping that they'll, like forgive and forget and whatnot. That said, given the Valar forgave Morgoth at one time, I don't see why they'd not forgive Galadriel, considering her crimes were not as bad as, well, Morgoth's. That being said, we also have, let me just see. We've got the forest of Fangorn that we're told lies to the west, and that on the one side of the Great River lies Rohan, and on the further side are the bleak hills of the Emyn Muil, and that the wind flows from the east there, because the Emyn Mill, looks out over the dead marshes and the Noman lands to Cirith Gorgor and the Black Gates of Mordor. So we're getting a bit of world building and we're getting a bit of geography here all at once.
Good call. And yeah, it's this sense
is a
of
great combo.
This the traveling down that river. The river divides the two paths. It's a nice thing of like, okay, we can the peace that we have found in Lorien for this time that we've been here, we can hold on to it a little bit longer as we head down this river, knowing that eventually we're going to have to depart the river and choose either to go to the right or to the left, east or west. And so I like that feeling of like it's an extension of Lothlorien. You're taking the river, and for now you don't have to make up your mind. You can put that off, and they do.
Yeah, and that's where I like what Joe pointed out about the river being a sundering, something that can't, or what was it? I have to switch between so many screens, and my computer's not cooperating right now. 1 sec. Let me just.
Joe mentioned sundering is an apt word for the sea. It keeps the elven populations apart / sundered.
Yeah, that's precisely it. And I think that's precisely what the sea has done in a way to the elves. But arguably, it's also what Sauron has done to them. He has sundered the elves from each other, just as Morgoth did before him. Boats built by Círdan might have been better, aka faster.
I just mentioned that. Yeah, he assisted in the crafting of Vingalot, so he was obviously an expert,
ship builder,
shipwright.
Yeah, and
and obviously living on the coast, he has more of a maybe more of a need to build seaworthy vessels as opposed to building stuff for the River Anduin, which I think would have a whole different skill set. But yeah.
And of course, we get Boromir weighing in about how weird Fangorn is. that this is a forest that there's legends and stories that the people of Gondor tell their kids about. And in turn, we also learn that, well, let me just make sure it's Aragorn. Yeah. Son of a, my tabs and windows are all over the place.
Uh-oh. Okay.
Yeah, it flicked me around all over for a moment. I don't know why. I have a weird lag going on. Anyways,
We have what's interesting is also that we got a lot of focus put on Rohan, which seems to be a major point of interest for Boromir, who seems to weigh it as being of extremely important, like of extreme importance, I should say, to the fate of Gondor and Middle Earth. And in this regard, given how much importance he's placing on Rohan, um, I do think Tolkien's not for nothing having the characters discuss Rohan quite a bit because, well, Rohan will prove to be what decides the fate of Middle Earth to an extent, as it is the armies of Rohan that puts a stop to the Witch King's own forces in the Pelennor Fields. So,
and this is all talking about stuff that's going to be coming up in book, in the Two Towers as well. So again, this is not in this book. It's kind of like a, hey, get ready, everybody. When we get past this river, look out.
Yeah, and I think that this is something that, how shall I word it? That shows Boromir is being presented as a fairly savvy tactician in a way, a strategist, because he himself knows the importance of the Rohirrim's horse riders, and that they could turn the tide in almost any battle to come. So it's interesting that where Denethor seems to be very insular and doesn't seem to put much stock in the alliance with Rohan, or he doesn't seem to do anything in regards to Rohan, not negative or positive. Boromir seems very keen on Rohan and seems to be a Rohanophile, I guess one might say.
Well, and they are allied, so Gondor and Rohan,
yeah, and they are natural allies. Old wives' tales. That quote. Often may chance that old wives keep in memory word of things that once were needful for the wise to know.
Yeah, yep. That's Celeborn pulls off a couple of zingers occasionally, and that's one of them.
Yeah, I think it's a really good zinger.
Yeah,
it's a great one.
Don't dismiss it because somebody maybe of lower status or something said it. You're like, no, there's some wisdom in some of those oft repeated lines. So yep.
Yeah, and Rivendell is called the last homely house. I always thought that it is not only meant for elves, while Lorien is a mystery and the people of Rohan are fearful towards what?
Towards it, probably.
Yes.
Yeah. There is what do they call Galadriel, like the White Witch or whatever. So you're right. Yeah. There's a known quality about Rivendell and an unknown quality. I think deliberately so. Galadriel's trying to kind of hide that area, be insular from the rest of the world. The fact that we in the previous chapter we see that folks like Haldir and the rest of the citizenry don't, Haldir goes out, but he still doesn't even know about the Grey Havens. He doesn't know about hobbits or where they might live. He doesn't, the world is unknown to these folks. Whereas I think in Rivendell, the world is very much known to those that live there because they travel a lot. And they, I think there's a known quality about Rivendell and an unknown quality about Lothlorien.
Yeah, and I think that this adds um, to the importance of Galadriel, but also it's interesting that we could have been told over and over again about um, Galadriel before we meet her. You know what I mean? Like that she's so mysterious or that people
Yep.
fear
Yep.
her. But we're told this stuff afterwards. And it's an interesting creative decision
Because most writers would, prefer to build the tension up towards her.
But Tolkien built just introduces her and then builds up the tension almost as an afterthought with regards to Galadriel. It's a very interesting decision on his part as a creative. And I think in a weird way, he's doing something that's very wise in that he's not having her overshadow the story, so to speak.
I got you. I think there might also be a sense of, he did foreshadow really bad times in Moria, right? Oh, Moria, don't go there. Let's try to go through the pass instead. Oh, we can't go
Yeah.
through the pass.
There
Well,
he
let's
does it
anywhere else.
classically.
Okay, fine. We'll go through Moria. Oh my God, it was terrible. And so maybe it's also a sense of just, in terms of the pacing or the storyline, to be like every place they go, if they foreshadow every single one with, oh my God, this is the worst possible thing. Why are we going there? And then they get through that.
They'll
And then
kill
the
the
next thing,
tension.
oh, you thought that was bad. Oh my God, this is much worse. So
Yeah.
maybe there's also a bit of that too, where it's like, I don't want to overplay. We just really played up Moria as the worst place you could go in this moment. Let's not then undersell Moria by
Because
making
then-
Lorien the next terrible place.
Yeah. Now we know Lorien isn't terrible, but
Yeah. But I'm
um,
just saying, if you're setting it up like, oh, she's a witch, that kind of thing. Yes,
Britain
Joe,
Hunter,
I do think
Vader,
Lothlorien
Vincent
is
Brock.
Doriath 2.0. I agree with that notion.
Yeah. And the thing is, I think Tolkien made the right call, but it's also him inverting what he did with Moria. You know what I mean? Like he builds up towards Moria, then he builds up Galadriel after the fact
Yep.
of meeting her. So in a way, he's inverting the order of these things. But we're also for once allowed to know more than what the characters like.
Right.
Us and the heroes know more than what the world around them knows. In this case,
Yep.
because they've actually been through the forest of Lothlorien.
Yes.
And now we'll
Great.
get to the song you really wanted to discuss
All right.
so badly.
Okay.
So the Elven
they're
song.
leaving. This is the end of the chapter. They're heading out on the river, and it says, soon the white form of the lady was small and distant. She shone like a window of glass upon a far hill in the westering sun, or as a remote lake seen from a mountain, a crystal fallen in the lap of the land. Then it seemed to Frodo that she lifted her arms in a final farewell, and far but piercing clear on the following wind came the sound of her voice singing. And that she sings in Elven, but they have a translation. So the song she sings is, like gold fall the leaves in the wind, long years numberless as the wings of trees. The years have passed like swift draughts of the sweet mead in lofty halls beyond the west, beneath the blue vaults of Varda, wherein the stars tremble in the song of her voice, holy and queenly. Who now shall refill the cup for me? For now, the kindler, Varda, the queen of the stars from Mount Everwhite, has uplifted her hands like clouds, and all paths are drowned deep in shadow. And out of a gray country, darkness lies on the foaming waves between us, and mist covers the jewels of Calasyria forever. Now lost to those from the east is Valimar. Farewell. Maybe thou shalt find Valimar. Maybe even thou shalt find it. Farewell. And so there's this, we get, before I mention a little bit more about it, we get in a letter, Tolkien describes his thoughts on what's happening in this poem, which I think are pretty relevant. So in his letters, he writes this statement. He says, the exiles, Noldor elves, were allowed to return to the west, save for a few chief actors in the rebellion, of whom at the time of the Lord of the Rings, only Galadriel remained. And then there's a footnote, and the footnote is pretty interesting. It says, at the time of her lament in Lorien, this song, she believed this to be perennial, as long as earth endured. Hence, she concludes her lament with a wish or prayer that Frodo may, as a special grace, be granted a purgatorial, but not penal, sojourn to Erisea, the solitary isle in sight of Aman. Though for her the way is closed. Her prayer was granted, but also her personal ban was lifted in reward for her services against Sauron, and above all for her rejection of the temptation to take the ring when offered to her. So at the end, we see her taking ship. Okay, so first of all, we start this poem, song, where she's talking about, I think she's comparing herself to Varda, Elbereth, right? That's our patron Vala of the elves. And so she's saying, Varda, Queen of the Stars, is sitting in lofty halls with cups filled with mead, and singing in her voice, and lifts up her arms. That's the motion that Galadriel has done here as she sings the song. She has her arms uplifted, and then she says, "Who shall refill the cup for me?" And so she's basically saying, I have been forsaken by the West. I yearn to have that sense of being in the West means. I am shut out from it, and I've been cut off. And she further brings up that point by saying, "The mist covers the jewels of Calasyria forever." If you go, Joe, to the last slide, there's a map that shows the very last. I don't know if you can get to it or not, but the very last image on the PowerPoint shows Calasyria is a path through the Pelori Mountains in the west. There we go. So you can see there it says Calasyria. That was created in order to let the light of the trees pass over to Tirion and to Alquilande, and it's covered with gems. When she says the mist covers the jewels of Calasyria forever, I think the implication is that there are these gems that reflect the light of the trees and do so through this narrow path through the mountains, so that those east of the mountains can take in the light. And so I think it's a very, fitting image, because she is yearning for the light of those trees. She's managed to capture a bit of it in this mirror of Galadriel. And so there's this regret. There's this sense of, actually, it's a lament. She's lamenting the loss of what all that meant to her. But then in that moment of regret and this forlorn quality, she has enough of a conscience, enough of an ethics to say, like, well, maybe you, Frodo, can do what I can't. Maybe you can find this salvation and end up in the West. So it's a little prayer for him to complete this quest. I think it's really, really, it's beautifully done. There's the sentiment behind it is this sadness, but also this willingness to show empathy and to aid those, even though it means really that she may not get anything out of it. I think it's really, really cool. So that's my thoughts on that song.
I think Freddie would have sung it better.
Freddie would have sung it better. Yes. Good afternoon, Robert. We started a little early. That's why you're coming in late. So we didn't mean to, miss your repartee, good sir.
It's just there's a massive time difference, and I'm kind of forgot when scheduling the episode.
No worries. Something that I promised to talk about last time, and then we kind of ran out of time, and so I thought, you know what, I'm gonna put it in discussion about this, because this is really the last time that doing any kind of conversation about Celeborn and Galadriel. This is the last chapter that really, focuses on them. So the thing I was going to talk about last time, and I'll talk about now, is what's called the ever-changing backstory to Galadriel and Celeborn's relationship. And so in the Unfinished Tales, there's this line from Christopher Tolkien that he says, there is no part of the history of Middle-earth more full of problems than the story of Galadriel and Celeborn. And it must be admitted that there are severe inconsistencies embedded in the traditions. Or to look at the matter from another point of view, that the role and importance of Galadriel only emerged slowly, and that her story underwent continual refashionings. And it's true, there's just a lot of variations in what her backstory is. So, thus, at the outset, it is certain that the earlier conception was that Galadriel went east over the mountains from Beleriand alone before the end of the First Age and met Celeborn in his own land of Lorien. This is explicitly stated in unpublished writing, and the same idea underlies Galadriel's words to Frodo in the Fellowship of the Ring, where she says of Celeborn, and this is in the previous chapter, or maybe the one before that, he has dwelt in the west since the days of dawn, and I have dwelt with him years uncounted. For ere the fall of Nargothrond or Gondolin, I passed over the mountains, and together through ages of the world we have fought the long defeat. And it says, in all probability, Celeborn was in this conception a Nandoran elf. That is, one of the Teleri who refused to cross the Misty Mountains on the great journey from Cuiviénen. Canonically, Celeborn is a Sindarin elf, one of those who dwelt with Thingol in Doriath. So that's your first idea. She crossed over. She met him where he was living, and he was an Andorran elf, and that was the story. So a wholly different story, adumbrated but never told, of Galadriel's conduct at the time of the rebellion of the Noldor, appears in a very late and partly illegible note. This is really interesting. It's the last writing of my father's on the subject of Galadriel and Celeborn, and probably the last on Middle-earth and Valinor, set down in the last month of his life. This is like almost literally the last thing that Tolkien wrote about Middle-earth. In this, he emphasized the commanding stature of Galadriel already in Valinor, the equal, if unlike, in endowments of Feanor. And it is said here that so far from joining in Feanor's revolt, she was in every way opposed to him. So this is a fascinating retcon of Galadriel's story. It keeps her basic motivations intact, but it completely removes her from the association with Feanor's downfall. So what I'm about to read here is a longer passage from Unfinished Tales, but I think it's really revelatory in seeing this evolution of Galadriel in Tolkien's mind that was apparently playing out in the last few days of his life. Okay, so it says, she did indeed wish to depart from Valinor and to go into the wide world of Middle-earth for the exercise of her talents. For being brilliant in mind and swift in action, she had early absorbed all of what she was capable of the teaching which the Valar thought fit to give the Eldar, and she felt confined in the tutelage of Aman. This desire of Galadriel's was, it seemed, known to Manwë, and he had not forbidden her, but nor had she been given formal leave to depart. Okay, so they're still like, well, maybe you could go if you wanted, but we haven't given you the stamp of approval yet. Pondering what she might do, Galadriel's thoughts turned to the ships of the Teleri, and she went for a while to dwell with her mother's kindred in Alqualande. Of course, I mentioned that with the swan boats earlier in this chat. There she met Celeborn. So in this case, Celeborn is with the Teleri elves in the west, who is here again a Teleran prince, the grandson of Olwe of Alqualande, and thus her close kinsman. Together, they planned to build a ship and sail it to Middle-earth. And they were about to seek leave from the Valar for their venture when Melkor fled from Valmar and, returning with Ungoliant, destroyed the light of the trees. In Feanor's revolt that followed the darkening of Valinor, Galadriel had no part. Indeed, she, with Celeborn, fought heroically in defense of Alqualande against the assault of the Noldor. So she's actively fighting, the Noldoran elves in this situation. Probably killing them? I don't know. At least defending the Teleri from them. And Celeborn's ship was saved from them. Galadriel, despairing now of Valinor and horrified by the violence and cruelty of Feanor, set sail into the darkness without waiting for Manwe's leave, which would undoubtedly have been withheld in that hour, however legitimate her desire in itself. It was thus that she came under the ban set upon all departure, and Valinor was shut against her return. But together with Celeborn, she reached Middle-earth somewhat sooner than Feanor and sailed into the haven where Círdan was lord. I know it's a long way to say this, but basically it's pretty clear that Tolkien is trying to absolve Galadriel of this canonical choice to ignore the warnings of the Valar and the misgivings of her father and journey to Middle-earth with the Noldor. So she and Celeborn are banned from returning to Aman, but for a completely different reason than Feanor. And that's really interesting to me. I maybe that's too, whatever, down the rabbit hole, but I find that really interesting that in the finality of Tolkien's writings, he really turned that story on its head quite a bit.
He did. Although I don't think he should have. I think what gave him the most trouble was trying to lean away from things.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that there's something to be said about there's a flaw, or like people embracing their flaws and dealing with them as opposed to perhaps not having flaws. But yeah, I got you.
Yeah, he also, the trouble is, he robbed her of a great arc, as you pointed out, but he ended up starting to overthink it and work himself up into circles and into work himself into a hole in a way, like running himself into a corner, as Dan tends to call it, so that the corner could just be slashed through just very easily by just embracing the fact she was there, she participated, just accept it. But the trouble is he kept changing the backstory to try to absolve her ever more. All it does is overcomplicate and overconvolute what should be a simple backstory. But it's Tolkien who kind of did it to himself. And this is the only part of the Legendarium I find that shows a lack of finesse or a lack of skill on his part, where he screwed up in a way that a novice wouldn't. Like your most novitiate fantasy writer would just decide on a backstory, that's it. But Tolkien couldn't quite do that. And that's the only time you see him really struggle and screw up. But on the other hand, in my view, he can be excused this mistake because he's Tolkien. He's given so much to fiction. We can forgive him this one mistake. And it doesn't affect Lord.
Well, it's not even a mistake in that it didn't become canonical. It was just he was writing,
yeah,
he never, kind of a what if scenario about, hey, I wonder if maybe we should make it this way. If he'd lived longer, maybe it might have worked its way into canon. But as it is, it's just kind of his state of mind or him trying to rethink that. But I think you're right. Maybe less is more in that situation.
Yeah, I think less is more, but he never quite made up his mind about Galadriel's backstory, is my point.
Yep.
The idea that the Valar would forbid freedom of movement of law-abiding elves always seems wrong to me. To an extent, but she did break the law. So she's not exactly law-abiding. Finrod didn't want to go to Middle-earth either. It was only after his father decided to stay that Finrod, as his heir, decided to go, so that his people would not be put under direct rule of Feanor.
Right, and I responded to that saying that, and fittingly, it was Finrod's sacrifice for Beren that let him overcome the ban even as far back in the First Age. It says he spent his days in the West with his father, basically, is what it said.
Yeah, I agree with Mark here. I like Celeborn being from Doriath. It just makes sense.
No, I agree. A Sindarin elf, and then coming west, coming east with Galadriel to set up shop in Lothlorien.
Yeah, it just makes a lot of sense, and it cements. It also explains the Sindarin elf connection that Galadriel has, so that we get a weaving together of the Noldor.
Right, because she was certainly in Doriath. So it kind of makes sense that apart from meeting with Melian and learning from Melian, she also met Celeborn. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's also a nice little nod to how Eorendil and his wife are an intermingling of Noldor and Sindarin as well, to an extent, given one of them stems from the line of Luthien and the other from the line of Tuor. At least that's how I like to look at it. And you have also Glorfindel. Glorfindel was also a bit confused, but I find less confused than a backstory.
So speaking of retconning stories, Glorfindel's story certainly got retconned as well.
In a good way.
Yeah, but yeah, so he did get re-embodied as well. So he and Finrod are our two who managed to get some kind of a dispensation from the Valar ahead of the end of the War of Wrath, when the rest of the Noldor got their dispensation.
Okay. Well, I think this is where we'll leave you guys off. It's getting late where I am.
Yeah.
So yeah, we leave you with the Fellowship drifting across the sea, and the question of will they make it in time, and all that jazz, and the whole to be continued on the screen.
That's right. So yes, we're chapter 9, the Great River. Will be so it's only 2 chapters left in the totality of the Fellowship of the Ring. We'll have covered the entire Fellowship. So pleasure as always talking to you, good sir.
Yep. And next time we'll be on Matt's channel of the Dork Lords.
Yep, back on the Dork Lords channel.
Yay.
So thank you all out there for joining us. Mark, Joe, Robert, anyone else out there, appreciate it, good sirs and ladies. And many thanks to you, the brothers Arda. We'll see everybody next time back on the Dork Lords channel.
Yes, and don't forget to subscribe to the Dork Lords.
And to the brothers Arda.
Yep.
Oh, that's right. Entering the Heart of Darkness chapters. Good call, Joe.
Ooh, nicely worded. Too bad they don't have Fatty to help them out. Really, what's missing from these upcoming chapters?
I mean, I hesitate to bring this up. I'll tell you what. There's a thing that might be interesting about Frediger might make an appearance in a film at some point. I'll bring that. That's our little teaser for next time. I'll mention that in our next recapping. But Frediger could potentially come to the big screen. I'll leave that there.
At long last.
Exactly. As he should, of course. So there you go. Kurtz equals Boromir. Yeah, okay. Yeah. I mean, I would say Boromir is a little more redemptive, a little more of an actual hero, but yeah, okay. But yeah, so all right. All that said, thanks to everyone. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Joe Quake. And we'll see everybody next time. Bye-bye, everybody.